it is quite intimidating for me to take upon myself this particular topic in light of the fact that we have here someone who's been described as the father of the Constitution, but has maybe assertive, and the chairman himself, who has written copiously on the subject. But I'm making this presentation as a citizen, not a spectator. I'm invoking my right as a citizen to express my views on the matter. The recent dogma has been Sika and Trinity from the president. I think that my presentation might make some diddy when I'm finished. So let me go right ahead and first of all, I must make it clear that the topic is excessive powers of the presidents under the 1992 Constitution. I don't want any mischievous reporter to go and say that Emile spoke about the excessive powers of President Nana Akufo-Addo. This is not it. We are looking at the powers of the president under the 1992 Constitution, which I consider to be excessive. Now, in the last 3 decades, we adopted a liberal democratic system that ushered in regular competitive multi-party elections, peaceful transfer of power, constitutionally guaranteed freedom of speech and of expression, respect for human rights, independent judiciary, and countervailing institutions of accountability. The new dawn of democracy provided fresh impetus for entrenching participatory, accountable, and inclusive governance, political stability, and general expectation of material development for the majority of the people. Since 1992, Ghana has managed 8 successive multi-party elections that has led to a multiple transfer of power between the National Democratic Council, NDC, and the New Patriotic Party, NPP, administrations. Generally, the electoral processes have been managed in a free, fair, transparent, and peaceful manner. This is corroborated by local and international election observers. Unfortunately, there were 8 deaths during the 2020 national elections. However, and I must say these are positive strides in our democratic governance. So it's important to mention, these developments. However, the mammoth powers granted to presidents under the 1992 Constitution make them powerful and influential in all spheres of the political, economic, and social life of the country. The president retains the power to appoint the chairperson and 2 deputies of the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, the chairperson, 2 deputy chairpersons, 4 other members of the Electoral Commission, chairman, 2 deputies, and 4 other members of the National Commission for Civic Education, the District Assembly's Common Fund Administrator, heads of security agencies, including the Inspector General of Police, the Auditor General, Head of Audit Service, Governor of the Bank of Ghana, the Chair and members of the National Development Planning Commission, the Chairman and other members of 1. The Public Service Commission, the Lands Commission, the governing bodies of public corporations, the government statistician, the Chief Justice and other justices of the Superior Courts, chief executives and board members of public enterprises, the chairperson, 2 deputy chairpersons, and 4 other members of the Commission for Civic Education, metropolitan, municipal, and district chief executives, that is MMDCs, heads of the state investigative and prosecutorial agencies, 11 members of the Council of State, and there are other powers which I'm not going into because I'm just focusing on the powers of appointment. But the executive has control of a lot of other areas, even our natural resources, which can be considered on a normal occasion. As a result, the President exercises some forms of control within the executive and beyond in order to get his wishes done or undo anything that is not favorable to him. Presidential appointments are generally viewed as a courtesy to which appointees must reciprocate with favorable disposition towards the appointing authority. These practices are a recipe for patronage and cronyism and severely constrain the development of effective checks and balances and governmental accountability. Moreover, the unrestrained appointment powers of the President and weak oversight by the legislature often leads to large size of government that burdens the ordinary taxpayer. For instance, the number of ministerial appointments increased by 38 within 1 year under 2 different administrations, 72 under Mahama's administration, and 110 under Akufo-Addo's government by 2017. Further, the President's extensive powers of appointment and influence in all spheres of the state create a zero-sum electoral politics or a winner-takes-all politics, which makes it difficult for opposition and civil society to survive without the goodwill of the President. Again, ruling party officials and foot soldiers are given special privileges in public employment opportunities and implementation of government's special initiatives. Therefore, winner takes all undermine accountability and quality governance outcomes. More seriously, the winner takes all creates acrimonious relationship between the ruling and opposition parties who, due to the severity of the deprivations, quickly begins to frame their political actions around how to win the next election. The President's consent is also sought on positions he does not directly appoint, such as the appointment of board members or state-owned media. In addition, the President plays a crucial role in determining the end of service benefits and additional perks for most of the appointees, including Article 71 holders and even members of Parliament. The above appointments are done either in consultation with the Council of State or with the advice of the Council of State, and in some cases, additionally, with approval of Parliament. Of course, when we talk about in consultation with the Council of State, nobody really knows how that process plays out. because in the first place, the President appoints a majority of the members of the Council of State, and also the proceedings of the Council of State are not known to the public, they are not transparent, and so it's a process that we find a little bit awkward. Of course, the issue of the Council of State is a matter for another day for discussion. It has been estimated that the President has the power to appoint no less than 5,000 persons into the public service. Now this is serious. And so it's not difficult to understand the acrimony, the division between ruling party and opposition. Now, there are many who would say that, I'm glad that the majority leader is here, and I'm glad that Mr. Obakwa is here. And it will be interesting to hear their views when I'm through about this whole issue about the excessive powers of the President, whether they subscribe to it, whether I would see something in the manifesto of the political parties about a desire to curtail these powers, or whether, as some have argued, that opposition parties are only waiting in the wings to come and exercise these extensive powers, and also, as somebody put it, to milk the cow. As a result, it is difficult to build inter-party consensus on planning and implementation of key national development issues, and even harder for one party to continue the development projects started by the previous regime. This is a very serious matter, the inability of succeeding governments to continue the project of the previous governments. I have encountered a few of these instances where long stretches of road have been abandoned because the contractor who was working on it, the contract was given to him by the previous government, and so he is not able to continue because the incoming government is not willing to pay him. And so, in fact, there are moves to give the contract to somebody else who is more sympathetic to the current government. I mean, it is the people who suffer as a result of these intricacies of our politics, which I fail to understand. Now, Article 78 of the 1992 Constitution of Ghana provides that the President shall appoint the majority of members from among members of Parliament. Specifically, it states that Ministers of State shall be appointed by the President with the prior approval of Parliament from among members of Parliament or persons qualified to be elected as members of Parliament, except that the majority of Ministers of State shall be appointed from among members of Parliament. Conventionally, the number of ministers under the Fourth Republic has ranged from 70 to 110. I believe it has been reduced by the NPP recently. Generally, a minimum of 40 persons serve concurrently in the executive and in the legislature. ODIPRO, a parliamentary watchdog CSO, reported in 2017 that 71 out of the 110 ministers appointed by President Akufo-Addo in his first term were MPs constituting about 25% of Parliament's entire membership. Since there is no cap on the number of ministers that the President can appoint, more than 50% of the appointees must come from among MPs. Again, as a matter of convention, the President appoints a number of non-minister MPs in the ruling party to serve as chairs and members of public boards. First, these practices over the years have undermined Parliament's ability to play an effective oversight over the executive. MPs who serve concurrently as ministers or appointees on public boards are reluctant to be critical of the policies and programs emanating from the executive for the fear of losing their ministerial positions. Again, the possibility for legislators to become ministers has conditioned non-minister MPs to act favorably towards the executive in order to attract the eye of the President for ministerial positions. In effect, it takes one to be an opposition MP, like the gentleman sitting next to me, in order to be critical of the government of the day. Appointing MPs to serve on boards and as chairs of state enterprises and corporations does not only weaken Parliament's oversight responsibilities, but also raises issues about conflict of interest, since MPs are mandated to play oversight roles of public entities. Can you imagine the quality of oversight by an MP who serves concurrently on the Finance Committee of Parliament and on the board of GCB Bank? In view of this, some international agreements have passed through Parliament without any critical debate or the needed scrutiny. Moreover, ministerial nominees almost always pass through parliamentary vetting without any serious challenge. And Parliament's lack of strong commitment in challenging the size of government defies their core mandates as protector of the public purse. Second, the temptation for MP ministers to prioritize ministerial over their legislative functions have dealt a blow to the legislature with respect to passage of laws, forming quorum to transact parliamentary business, etc. This was aptly described in a BBC Pidgin News as, quote, 85 Kubolo MPs, the slow Ghana Parliament with them absenteeism. I hope you all know what Kubolo is. Odikro reported in 2017 that MP ministers and MP deputy ministers were absent in 65% and 35% of parliamentary sittings, respectively. Also, ruling party MPs recorded an absenteeism rate of 72%, whereas the opposition party MPs recorded 28%. Speaker after speaker have lamented the absence of ministerial MPs in the House to deal with parliamentary business. These percentages are explained by the numerous engagements of ruling party MPs by the executive. Absenteeism deprives Parliament of a quorum to transact parliamentary business, that is, 1/3 of MPs, and a quorum for decision-making, half of MPs. Notwithstanding, it must be recognized that the changing composition in Parliament has shown some level of parliamentary accountability, though not as strong as majority of Ghanaians would have expected from the legislature. Again, The introduction of Private Members Bill under the 8th Parliament of Ghana is a great initiative that will decentralize the lawmaking powers within the state and allow Parliament, civil society, and the private sector to directly influence the lawmaking process. Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante, who we are privileged to have with us today, who was chairman of the committee of experts appointed by the PNDC to draft a consultation, has lamented the creation by the 1992 Constitution of a, quote, monarchical executive. In his J.B. Dankwa Memorial Lectures on Reflections on the Constitution, Law and Development, he stated that initially he suggested that the presidential powers under the Constitution are on the whole not excessive. However, and I quote here, on further reflection and having regard to empirical evidence on the exercise of this enormous executive apparatus in our governance system, I am prepared to recant my views and concede that the powers wielded by the monarchical executive are indeed excessive. He further commented that executive or imperial presidency has given birth to the culture of winner takes all, which has a pernicious, divisive, polarizing, and retrogressive feature of our system of governance. This is why, he says, every general election is a source of great consternation and a potential source of conflict. During this moving towards the election, some of our churches have to go to the mountain hill, we'll fast and pray, we'll make sure that no disaster occurs. It happens every time we approach an election. Professor Jampo, who was until recently an integral part of the IA, also had this to say on the issue. The exercise of extensive appointment powers of the President to the benefit of only some party apparatchiks and foot soldiers does not only promote WTA politics, it deepens clientelism and also undermines meritocracy by placing, quote, square pegs in round holes in the public service. Lee Kuan Yew, one of my favorite individuals who I admire for what he has done for Singapore, and if you read his book From Third World to First World, you really, it should be a textbook for everybody in the public service. He had this to say on meritocracy. I make no apologies for collecting the best talented team I could get in addressing the audience comprising of a cross-section of the people of Singapore. He said, without them, none of you will be enjoying life today in Singapore. I believe completely in the meritocratic system. I am not interested in who your father or mother is, unquote, the other statement which I didn't include. So in other words, I am hoping, although I might be too naive, that our political parties will in the not too distant future adopt the policy of meritocracy in making appointments to public service positions. Now, I want to have a look at the IEA Advisory Committee on the Winner Takes All system. This was a committee set up by the IEA in 2014 under the headship of Archbishop Charles Panapakal and I was also a member of that committee. And we undertook a nationwide public consultation process on this issue, and we made recommendations for reform. And I'll be presenting those recommendations and wait to hear what all of you have to say about them. But the team made the following recommendations. While appointment to constitutional bodies should remain under the President, recommendations for these appointments should emanate from certain clearly designated bodies that have the capacity to identify suitable persons using clearly predetermined criteria. A duly constituted body comprising professional bodies or institutions shall recommend suitable individuals of at least 5 from among whom the President shall make a nomination to Parliament. I'll be showing the composition of the various committees. But this is part of the proposal to ensure that we get the best brains for public positions, that we adopt a meritocratic policy rather than the policy that we adopt presently of the ruling parties giving positions only to party loyalists and party sponsors. As part of the recommendation, parliamentary vetting and approval of the President's nominee shall be by 2/3 majority of all members of Parliament. It is recommended that a strong tenure track and technocratic civil service be established. This should be an efficient body that can manage the affairs of the country in the absence of an elected government or coalition. Appointments of CEOs of public corporations and institutions and other analogous positions should be transparent, competitive, well advertised, inclusive, bipartisan, and based on competence. Nominations should emanate from the State Enterprises Commission, Public Services Commission, and appropriate recommendations made to the President for appointment. With regard to the legislation, some of the concerns which were expressed was the efficiency and effectiveness of Parliament is weakened by the current practice of appointing members of Parliament as ministers. And inadequate provisions in the Constitution should be made for parliamentary control over fiscal management of the economy. All ministers must be appointed from outside Parliament. Any member of Parliament appointed minister must resign his or her seat and a by-election held within 21 days to replace him or her. Article 108 of the Constitution, which deals with the legislative role of Parliament, should be reviewed to strengthen Parliament's primary role of lawmaking. The executive must be accountable to Parliament through a vote of censure. This must be binding and not dependent on the President's discretion. Presently, it depends on the President's discretion, and we recently heard that there is going to be a vote of censure on the Minister for Finance. And but if you look at the law, it says that if the vote is presented to the President, he may terminate the appointment of the minister. But we are recommending that it should be binding on the President, and the MP or minister should go. These proposals, if implemented, will mitigate the negative manifestation of the winner-takes-all system. It will promote inclusive governance and national development. They would facilitate the establishment of strong governance institutions. They will build consensus among governance stakeholders, government, political parties, civil society, and generate public confidence and public legitimacy in the institutions of state. Checks and balances between the three arms of government necessary for good governance will be enhanced. Now, I want to present the various committees which we suggested should be set up to identify persons who will be presented to the president for appointment, at least 5 persons. And in this regard, the positions would be advertised. Civil society should be able to submit names to the committee, of course with a person's consent. And there will be an interview by the committee, and the committee would then submit 5 names to the president, and the president would appoint from these names. Now for the Electoral Commission, a representative of the following: political parties with representation in Parliament, Judiciary, Ghana Bar Association, National House of Chiefs, TUC, civil in the areas of governance and democracy, Vice Chancellors of public universities, Christian Council and Catholic Bishops' Conference, Muslim Council and Ahmadiyya Mission. For the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, a representative of the following: the Judiciary, Ghana Bar Association, civil society organizations working in the area of transparency and accountability, civil society organizations working in the area of human rights, Ghana Police Service, Ghana Journalists Association, Ghana Medical Association, Trades Union Congress, Christian Council and Catholic Bishops' Conference, and the Muslim Council. The committee in charge of making recommendations to the President for appointment of an Inspector General of Police would consist of a representative of political parties with representation in Parliament, security agencies apart from the Police Service, Ghana Journalists Association, Ghana Bar Association, Trades Union Congress, civil society organizations working in the area of governance, and human rights civil society organizations. For the Chief Justice and Justice of the Supreme Court, a representative of the following: Judicial Council, Ghana Bar Association, National House of Chiefs, Trade Union Congress, Christian Council, Catholic Bishops' Conference, and Ghana Pentecostal and Charismatic Council, Muslim Council and Ahmadiyya Mission. For the Governor of the Bank of Ghana, a representative of the following: Ministry of Finance, Ghana Institute of Planners, Institute of Chartered Accountants, Trade Union Congress, Chartered Institute of Bankers, Association of Vice Chancellors, former governors of the Bank of Ghana. For the Auditor General, the committee would compose of a representative of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Trade Union Congress, Chartered Institute of Bankers, Public Services Commission, representative from the Ghana Bar Association, and Ghana Police Service. The National Commission for Civic Education, a representative from the following: Ghana Journalists Association, Ghana Medical Association, Trades Union Congress, political parties with representation in Parliament, Institute of Adult Education, CSOs in Governance and Advocacy, women's groups, National Union of Ghana Students, and the Economic and Organized Crime Office, a representative from the following: Trades Union Congress, Chartered Institute of Bankers, Ghana Police Service, Ghana Bar Association, Ghana Journalists Association, and Ghana Institute of Engineers. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a recommendation which we actually forwarded to President Mahama when he was in office, but we never got a response from him. And as I said earlier, the whole idea of this kind of method of appointing people into public service is to ensure that we adopt the principle of meritocracy. We get people from institutions that can identify people who are qualified to occupy the stated position. And you do not take the power from the president. He has to appoint, but he would appoint from a carefully compiled list after interviews and so on. Now, as I said earlier, this may seem naive to a layperson like me, but I hope that the politicians will give serious consideration to these recommendations in order to put away this winner-takes-all system, which hasn't helped our country in any way, and also to ensure that we get the best people for the positions in public office. And it may be that this comes at a good time when our economy is in distress. Thank you very much for your attention.